Karoline Leavitt stepped into the Capital Luxury Motors showroom, her eyes locking on the sleek azure coupe. The salesman, Blake Thompson, gave her a quick once-over, a sneer curling on his lips. He chuckled and gestured dismissively toward the exit. "This isn't the place for MAGA folks like you." Karoline's jaw tightened. She said nothing, only held his gaze with quiet steel, then turned and walked out, her heels clicking with purpose. The next morning, the showroom's glass doors swung open again. A fire-red Rolls-Royce Phantom purred to a stop at the curb. Blake looked up, his smirk fading. The back door opened slowly. Nicholas Rio stepped out, tall, impeccably dressed, commanding. Karoline's husband, and a billionaire investor with ties across Washington. Blake's eyes widened. He never saw it coming. The day before, Karoline Leavitt, 27, the youngest White House press secretary in U.S. history, had just wrapped a relentless day at the West Wing. Still in work mode, she wore a crisp white button-down, black dress pants, and low heels. Around her neck, a subtle MAGA pendant. A quiet declaration. She needed a new vehicle, not just for transport, but for presence. The Azure Coupe was more than a car. It was a message. A $285,000 midnight blue masterpiece. Fierce but elegant. Everything the liberal media said she couldn't. Capital Luxury Motors catered to DC's elite. Porsches, Bentleys, Ferraris, gleaming behind floor-to-ceiling glass. But beneath the luxury, a staff with little patience for conservatives like her. Karoline stepped inside. A soft chime announced her presence. The scent of leather and polished chrome filled the air. Her eyes landed on it instantly. The Azure Coupe. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Can I help you?" asked a young man. Probably mid-20s in a slightly oversized suit. She nodded. "I'd like to see the Azure Coupe." He brightened. "Of course. It's got a V8 engine. Handcrafted interior." "Daniel." A deeper voice cut in. Blake Thompson emerged. Late 40s, designer suit, slicked back hair, and a smirk that reeked of politics. "I'll take it from here." Daniel stepped back. Flustered, Blake turned his gaze on Karoline, eyes scanning her like a TSA agent with an attitude. "I'm Blake. Sales manager. What are you looking for exactly?" Karoline kept her tone neutral. "The Azure Coupe. I'd like to see the interior." He stepped between her and the car. "You sure? It's a limited edition. Not just anyone gets behind the wheel." "I'm aware," she said. "That's why I'm here." Then he tilted his head, recognition dawning. "Wait. Karoline Leavitt, right? Trump's press secretary." He said Trump like it was a slur, loudly enough that a few other customers turned. "That's right," she replied, voice steady. He chuckled. "Didn't peg you for the luxury type. What's next? Press briefings from the back seat?" He turned to Daniel, smirking. "Guess MAGA knows how to fake class too, huh?" Daniel looked down. Uncomfortable. Karoline didn't flinch. Not here to fake anything. I'm here to buy a car. Today." Blake's smirk lingered. He leaned in. "Miss Leavitt, we serve a very specific clientele here. People with refined taste. Social awareness, not showy conservatives with donor money to burn." "Social awareness?" Karoline repeated, her voice like ice. "You mean politics that match yours?" "I mean knowing who you are and who you're not," he said. "This car doesn't suit your image. Maybe try something less ambitious." Karoline's fists tightened at her sides, but her voice remained calm, her composure razor-sharp. "I didn't ask for your opinion. I asked to see the car. You don't have to like me, but you will treat me like every other customer." Blake just scoffed, but by the next morning she wouldn't need to ask, because her husband had arrived, and this time he had questions. "For Blake Thompson, you don't need to care what I'm using it for," Karoline said, locking eyes with him. "I'm a customer. I have money, and I want to see the car. That's it." Blake stepped back, like she'd just said something ridiculous. "Money," he scoffed. "You're serious? Walking in here dressed like that, with that little plastic MAGA necklace? Who exactly do you think you are? Demanding an Azure Coupe?" The whispers started. A couple near the Ferrari glanced over. Two sales associates near the front desk murmured, one stifling a laugh. Daniel, still standing nearby, lowered his gaze, shifting awkwardly with a brochure clutched to his chest. Blake crossed his arms, his stance firm, challenging. "Look, Miss Leavitt," he said, voice dripping disdain. "I don't have time for MAGA stunts. If you want a car, book an appointment like everyone else. Otherwise, maybe try Tesla, better for the environment." Karoline didn't flinch. "I don't need your suggestions," she said, voice low but steady. "I want this car. Now Blake stood fully between her and the Azure Coupe. as if guarding it from contamination. "Don't you get it?" he snapped. "This is my turf. And I say no." The background music faded into silence. Even the hum of showroom chatter seemed to stop. The midnight blue azure coupe gleamed behind him. Out of reach, for now, Karoline stood firm in her crisp white shirt, black pants, and subtle pendant. Her voice, when it came, was cool and practiced. The same one she'd used to face down hostile reporters in the White House briefing room. "Your turf," she said evenly. "I thought this was a car dealership, not a political club. I have the money. I want to buy the Azure Coupe. So what's your actual reason for refusing me?" Blake let out a sharp laugh. It cut like broken glass. "Seriously? Look at you, that necklace, that smug attitude. You think the world owes you. Because you defended Trump on TV? We don't want your kind here." Karoline's brow furrowed slightly, but she stayed composed. "My money spends the same as anyone else's in this showroom. You can't just refuse service because you don't like who I work for." Blake stepped closer, his voice lowering into a sneer. "Oh, I can," he said. "This is a private business, and I don't want your dirty MAGA money tainting this showroom." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. A man in a tailored blue suit near the Bentley leaned toward his wife. "Who is she?" he asked. "She's Trump's press secretary," the woman whispered back. "I've seen her on Fox." A saleswoman with platinum blonde highlights giggled to another employee. "Blake's teaching her a lesson." Daniel, silent and still, clenched his jaw. His face burned with quiet shame. Karoline took a slow breath, her voice sharper now. "Dirty money?" she said. "You're talking about my salary, earned by doing my job, representing millions of Americans. When you insult me, you insult them." Blake shrugged dramatically and turned to the growing crowd. "Hey, everyone," he boomed, voice theatrical now, full of performative outrage. "Miss Leavitt here wants to use MAGA money to buy one of our cars. What's next? Slap a Trump flag on it and cruise past the Washington Post." A few people laughed. The man by the Bentley nodded. His wife chuckled behind her hand. But not everyone joined in. An older woman in a gray cardigan frowned. "She just wants to buy a car," she muttered. "What's wrong with that?" Blake ignored her. He turned back to Karoline and jabbed a finger toward the showroom doors. "You heard them. This isn't your place. I don't care if you're a press secretary or a Twitter celebrity. Get out." Karoline didn't move. Her voice came, steady as steel. "I'm a customer, not a protester, not a politician. You have no legal right to throw me out." Blake stepped even closer, his voice rising with each word. "Legal right. I don't like you. That's enough. This is my turf, and I say you don't belong. Leave, or I'll call security." He pointed sharply at the door. The crowd fell silent. All eyes turned to Karoline. She looked around. Some smirks, some pity, some discomfort. She could call her attorney, file a lawsuit, make this public. But not here. Not like this. Her voice, when it came, was calm and cutting. "Fine," she said. "You want me out? I'll go. But this isn't over." She turned and walked out, heels clicking against marble, back straight. At the door, sunlight poured in, catching the edge of her silhouette. Her hand tightened around her phone. Blake thought he'd won. Thought he'd humiliated the MAGA girl in front of his showroom. But what he didn't know was Karoline Leavitt wasn't leaving. Not really. And tomorrow she'd return. With backup. Defeated, but not broken. Karoline stepped through the glass doors. The soft chime rang behind her, a hollow punctuation mark on the confrontation that had just played out. But this wasn't the end. Inside, the showroom buzzed with whispers. Blake strutted back to his post, pride swelling in his chest like he'd just won something. Karoline crossed the lot and opened the door of her old silver Toyota Camry. The paint had faded, and the seats were worn, but right now it was a sanctuary. She slid behind the wheel, her fingers gripping it tightly. The late afternoon sun was fading over Capital Luxury Motors, but inside her, something smoldered. Blake's voice echoed in her mind. "Get an electric car! It's more modern!" Her jaw clenched. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and tapped the screen. The line rang twice. A deep, slightly raspy voice answered. "Karoline, you okay?" Her voice came quiet, but even. "Nicholas, I just got kicked out of a dealership in—" DC silence on the other end. She pictured him in their home office, probably standing now, salt and pepper hair tousled, his eyes narrowing with each word. Nicholas Rio, age 59. Once homeless, now owner of a real estate empire that stretched across New England. He didn't anger easily. But when it came to Karoline, he was all fire. "Kicked out?" he said, his tone darkening. "Who the hell did that to you?" Karoline started the car. The engine purred to life as she pulled out of the lot. Manager, Blake Thompson. He recognized me as Trump's press secretary. Refused to sell me the Azure Coupe. Said my money was dirty. Told me I didn't belong there. Nicholas inhaled sharply. The sound hissed through the phone like steam from a cracked pipe. What exactly did he say? She repeated it. Every jab, every insult. Blake's sneer, his mockery, the final threat. "Get out or I'll call security." She stopped at a red light, her fingers drumming the steering wheel. "I stood my ground," she said. "Told him my money was as good as anyone's. Didn't matter. He hid behind private business rights. Mocked the president, too." Nicholas muttered something under his breath. Low, sharp, and vicious. She heard the creak of his leather chair, imagined him pacing the room. Karoline almost smiled. Nicholas wasn't just a wealthy businessman. He'd clawed his way from nothing, literally nothing. Park benches, shelter lines, hustling scraps in Hampton Beach. Now he owned millions in property and had promised her, the day he proposed, that no one would ever touch her without facing him. "Who does this clown think he is?" Nicholas growled. "You're the White House press secretary. You work your ass off every day, and he calls your money dirty?" Karoline merged onto the highway. City lights blinked in the distance. "To him, I'm everything he despises," she said. "Trump, MAGA, a young woman who didn't back down. He didn't just want to refuse me. He wanted to humiliate me." Nicholas was quiet for a long beat. Then, "What do you want me to do?" Karoline exhaled slowly. She could let it go, or call a lawyer, or drop it to Breitbart and watch the internet eat Blake alive. But she wasn't one to let things go. "I don't want revenge," she said carefully. "But I want him to see his mistake. He thinks being liberal gives him a license to degrade people. I want him to realize he messed with the wrong woman." Nicholas chuckled, low and full of dangerous amusement. "All right," he said. "I know what to do." "Nicholas." She frowned. "Don't overdo it." He ignored her warning. She could hear him moving, likely heading to the garage, where the $1.5 million Rolls-Royce Phantom waited, its deep red paint gleaming like blood in the dark. "Overdo it?" he repeated. "I'm just going to show him exactly who he insulted. You're Karoline Leavitt. No one gets to disrespect you." Karoline laughed softly. "The first time since the humiliation." "Fine. But I want every detail after." "You'll get them," Nicholas promised. "Now go home. Nico's waiting for you." She smiled faintly as she drove, her headlights sweeping, across quiet suburban streets. Her fingers brushed the small MAGA necklace resting against her collarbone. A symbol Blake had mocked, but she wore it like armor. Blake Thompson thought he'd won. Thought she'd leave and disappear. But tomorrow, he'd learn who Karoline Leavitt really was. The garage door eased shut behind her, muffling the night outside. Inside, the warm glow of the living room spilled through the curtains, casting soft gold across the concrete. Karoline stepped in, kicked off her heels, and paused. Through the open office door, she saw Nicholas seated in a leather chair, a glass of whiskey in one hand, his eyes fixed on his phone. He wore a plain grey shirt, sleeves pushed up, salt and pepper hair slightly disheveled, signs of a long day with Rio Enterprises. Blueprints and notes littered his desk. But the moment he heard her steps, he looked up. "You're back," he said, standing. His dark brown eyes flashed, part concern, part fury. At 59, Nicholas Rio still carried the rugged strength of the man who once clawed his way out of homelessness on Hampton Beach. Broad shoulders, square jaw, a presence that filled a room. Or cleared one. "Nico's asleep upstairs," he added gently. "You okay?" Karoline nodded, sinking into the couch opposite him. "I'm fine," she said quietly. "But I can't stop thinking about it. Blake didn't just refuse to sell me a car. He wanted to humiliate me, to make a point, to prove that his politics made him better." Nicholas tightened his grip on the whiskey glass, his knuckles whitening. "He thinks he's noble just because he hates Trump?" He set the glass down, his voice lowering. "He picked the wrong woman to humiliate." Karoline gave him a steady look. "I told you. I don't want revenge. I want him to understand he was wrong, not be ruined." Nicholas smiled, that same mischievous smile he'd worn when he proposed to her in New Hampshire. "I'm not buying the dealership just to fire him," he said. "Though I could. But I will make sure tomorrow is a day he never forgets." He stepped out of the office and motioned for her to follow. "Come on. I'll show you what I'm bringing." They walked through the dim hallway, the floor creaking softly beneath them, and into the spacious back garage. He flipped on the overhead lights. There it was, the Rolls-Royce Phantom. A $1.5 million statement, painted deep red like the MAGA flag. The chrome wheels gleamed like polished silver. Inside, the custom beige leather seats looked untouched, regal. Nicholas ran a hand across the hood with pride. "Had it made last year, after Nico was born. Tomorrow I'm driving this to Capital Luxury Motors." Karoline stared at the car, then back at him, a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "Nicholas, don't make this a flex. That's not what this is about." He stepped closer, resting a hand on her shoulder. "It's not. I'm not going to flaunt wealth. I'm going to buy the car you wanted, calmly and respectfully. But I'm going to make sure Blake understands exactly who he dismissed." His voice grew firm. "He thinks you don't belong in his world. I'm going to show him his world is smaller than he thinks." Karoline hesitated, thinking, "But if you just buy it, he might think he won, that his attitude didn't matter." Nicholas smiled again, wider this time, a spark of something deeper flashing in his eyes. "That's why I'm not stopping with the car." He turned toward her. "After the purchase, I'll invite him to the Veterans Fundraiser Gala next month, the MAGA event you're hosting. He'll have to face the very people he mocked, the ones he claims don't belong. He'll see who they really are." Karoline let out a breath, half disbelief, half admiration. "You're smarter than I give you credit for." Nicholas chuckled, pulling her into his arms. "I have to be. I married you." His voice dropped. "He messed with the wrong woman, Karoline. I had nothing once. Slept on benches, Scrape by. I know what real worth looks like. It isn't politics or status. It's how you treat people. And he's going to learn that. Directly from me, she leaned into him, silent for a beat. You're sure? Absolutely. He stepped back, walking to the Phantom's driver's side. Door. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. I'll be there. You don't have to come, but I'll tell you everything. Karoline glanced at the gleaming red paint, the soft garage light reflecting off the hood like firelight. All right. I want the full story afterward. Nicholas gave a single nod, a calm but defiant smile returning to his face. The next morning, sunlight spilled across Washington, D.C., glinting off the glass facade of Capital Luxury Motors. A low, powerful rumble echoed through the lot as the deep red Phantom rolled toward the entrance. Heads turned. A few people lifted their phones. Someone whispered, "What a car! Must be someone big." Inside the showroom, Blake Thompson looked up and everything began to change. Blake Thompson stood beside a Bentley Continental, adjusting his gray tie as he laughed with a wealthy client. Still smug from tossing Karoline Leavitt out yesterday, he felt untouchable, like he'd scored a political point by denying a MAGA loyalist service. Then the Rolls-Royce door opened. Nicholas Rio stepped out. At 59, he was tall, broad-shouldered, and deliberate in his movements. His fitted dark gray suit accentuated the presence of a man who'd built a real estate empire from nothing. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, his eyes sharp and cold. The blazing red Phantom behind him wasn't just a car. It was a symbol, a challenge, a flag. He closed the door with quiet force and strode through the glass entrance. The chime above the door rang, but it was drowned in the sudden silence that fell across the showroom. Blake turned mid-sentence. His grin faltered. People stopped, talking. Phones subtly rose. The young receptionist, Daniel, leaned toward a co-worker and whispered, "That's the guy who just pulled up in the Phantom. What the hell does he want?" Blake straightened and walked toward him, masking his unease. "Good morning, sir. I'm Blake Thompson, sales manager. What can I do for you today?" His voice was smooth, but his eyes kept flicking nervously, toward the red Phantom outside. Nicholas gave him a slow, cutting once-over. "Nicholas Rio," he said, his voice carried. "Karoline Leavitt's husband. Yesterday, you refused to sell her a car because she supports Trump. I'm here to talk about that." A ripple of whispers rolled through the floor. A customer near the Bentley muttered, "That's her husband. The press secretary's." His companion nodded, suddenly wide-eyed. "He's probably loaded." Blake blinked, his lips parting. But no words came. Nicholas didn't wait. "Don't lie," he snapped. "You called her money dirty. You humiliated her. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to buy the azure coupe she came for." He pointed to the midnight blue car on display. His gaze never left Blake. Blake swallowed, his hand twitching at his collar. "The azure coupe. Yes, of course. We can arrange that." He hesitated. "But, I need to ask, are you seriously interested in purchasing it today? It's a limited edition. Not every—" Nicholas stepped closer, his voice dropping. "I'm not here, for your permission. I said I'm buying it. My wife needs it for work. Press briefings, White House events. You rejected her over politics, without knowing who she is. Or who I am." From the back office, Richard Mason emerged, owner of Capital Luxury Motors, a man in his early 50s wearing a crisp navy suit and a veneer of charm now cracking with stress. "Is there a problem?" he asked, approaching cautiously. Nicholas didn't look away from Blake as he spoke. "The problem is, your manager insulted my wife, Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary. He refused to sell her a car over politics, made a scene. I'm here to finish what she started." Blake jumped in, trying to recover. "Mr. Rio, I didn't mean offense. We just prioritize clients who align with, well, socially conscious values." Nicholas turned to him, eyes like ice. "Socially conscious? You think kicking out a woman who represents millions of Americans is noble?" His voice rose. "Karoline interned for Trump, ran for Congress, and became the youngest press secretary in U.S. history. And you're a salesman playing gatekeeper." Richard Mason raised both hands in surrender. "Mr. Rio, I deeply apologize. This shouldn't have happened. We don't want to lose a customer over politics. I'll handle the Azure myself." Nicholas gave a single nod but didn't smile. "Good. I want the paperwork done today." He turned back to Blake. "But I'm not finished with him." Blake stiffened. "Consequences? What do you mean?" Nicholas smirked, but there was no warmth behind it. "I'm not ruining you. I don't need to. But you're going to learn that your politics don't give you the right to disrespect people, especially not my wife." He turned to Richard. "Get the car ready. I'll explain what comes next." The entire showroom stood still. The only sound was Blake's shallow breathing as his composure unraveled. Nicholas Rio stood tall in the center of the gleaming floor, every eye on him. Behind him through the glass doors, the red phantom still glinted in the sunlight. But the true spectacle was inside. Blake Thompson had thought yesterday was the lesson. Today he realized class was just beginning. "Good. I want the paperwork done today," Nicholas said, voice steely. "My wife needs that car for work, press briefings, White House events. She doesn't have time for petty ideological games." He walked to the midnight blue Azure coupe, running a hand slowly along its hood. Then he turned, his gaze drilling, into Blake. "But I'm not just here to buy a car. You insulted her, and that won't slide." Richard Mason stepped forward, trying to interject. "Mr. Rio, I assure you, this won't happen again. Blake, he just... Don't defend him." Nicholas's voice sliced through the air. "He called her money dirty, kicked her out like she didn't belong. I've had nothing. I've slept on benches. But I never judged someone for their beliefs. He did." Blake took a step back, the self-righteous veneer cracking. "I have the right to choose who I sell to, don't I?" Nicholas gave a dry laugh. It echoed. "Your right ends where you start humiliating people. You think you're better than her because you're progressive?" He stepped closer, each word deliberate. "You know nothing about her. From Trump intern, to congressional candidate, to the youngest press secretary in U.S. history. And you, a car salesman, decided she wasn't worthy." The room was silent. All eyes were on them. At the reception desk, Daniel whispered, "He's right." Blake flushed. His voice cracked. "You don't get it. We don't want MAGA ties in here." Nicholas cut in again. "Don't want MAGA ties? Yet here you are, watching me roll in with a $1.5 million Rolls-Royce." He jabbed a finger toward the sunlit phantom outside. "I built Rio Enterprises from nothing, own half the real estate in New England. My wife and I don't need your approval. But you're about to learn a lesson." Richard rushed forward. "Mr. Rio, I apologize. For Blake, for everything. We'll sell you the Azure at the best price. No fees. I promise." Nicholas raised a hand. "I'll buy it, but not to reward him. Karoline needs it. Where's the paperwork?" Richard nodded quickly. "Daniel, Get the paperwork." Daniel sprinted off. Blake stood frozen, hands clenched, eyes hollow. Nicholas faced him one final time. His voice was low, firm. "I could buy this whole dealership and fire you today, but I won't." He paused. "Instead, you'll volunteer at the Veterans Fundraiser Gala Karoline's hosting next month. You'll meet the people you despise, see their worth, learn what respect means." Blake blinked, confused. "Volunteer? I don't—" "You will." Nicholas didn't raise his voice, but the finality in it was clear. "Or I'll make sure no one ever wants to buy from you again. Your choice." Blake went quiet. His face drained of color, eyes dropped. Richard jumped in, desperate to end the scene. "He'll do it. I guarantee it." Daniel returned, breathless, papers in hand. Nicholas took them, scanned, then signed without hesitation. "Deliver the car to Karoline in 24 hours. "Yes, sir," Richard said, nearly bowing. "It'll be done." Nicholas handed the forms back and gave Blake one last look. "You thought you won by kicking her out. You didn't. Your liberalism doesn't make you better than anyone." Turned and walked to the glass doors. His footsteps echoed like hammer strikes on marble. The red Rolls-Royce outside still shimmered under the sun. Blake stood rooted in place, trembling hands by his sides. Around him, whispers surged, some with approval, others with disdain. In minutes, his smug pride had crumbled. 1 month later, Grand Hyatt in Washington, D.C., shimmered beneath the city lights. Inside, the Veterans Fundraiser Gala was in full swing, an ocean of American flags and MAGA banners, polished tables filled with donors, veterans, and their families. A patriotic brass band played softly, and the air buzzed with laughter, pride, and stories of service. At the front of the ballroom, Karoline Leavitt stood near the stage, wearing a tailored navy business dress. A silver MAGA necklace glinted under the lights. She smiled warmly, chatting with a group of veterans, her voice gracious, her presence magnetic. Near the back entrance, wearing a plain black polo and a volunteer badge, was Blake Thompson. He pushed the wheelchair of a young veteran named Tom, who had lost both legs in Kandahar. Tom laughed as he told Blake about his time in the service. Blake nodded, silent, listening. No smugness, no speech, just quiet duty. Karoline glanced toward him briefly, then returned her attention to the veteran beside her. Blake looked down at Tom. For the first time in a long while, he didn't have anything clever to say. And maybe that was the beginning of change. Blake leaned down beside the wheelchair. "Water, right? I'll grab you a glass," he said, voice softer than it had ever been. His usual smugness had vanished. In its place, quiet awkwardness. A month working alongside people he once dismissed had started to wear down his arrogance. Slowly change was taking root. Nicholas Riccio had forced him to volunteer at the gala. But now, under the shimmering lights of the Grand Hyatt, Blake no longer felt forced, just uncertain, a little less sure of himself, a little more aware. Karoline Leavitt stepped down from the stage, her navy dress elegant, her heels clicking lightly on the hardwood. She spotted Blake from across the room and walked over, her expression unreadable. "Blake," she said with a faint, amused smile. "Didn't think you'd actually show." Blake froze mid-step, one hand on Tom's wheelchair, his face flushed. "Leavitt." He nodded. "Your husband didn't leave me much choice. Said if I skipped this, I'd be out of business." She turned to Tom and gave him a warm smile. "Thanks for being here today, Tom." Wouldn't miss it, ma'am, the young veteran said, grinning. Then she looked back at Blake. So, how's it feel? Being around the people you thought you had all figured out? Blake looked down for a moment. Then, not what I expected. He exhaled. I used to think MAGA folks were just loud, clueless, performative. But people like Tom? He glanced at the young man beside him. They're not who I imagined. They're not the enemy. Karoline crossed her arms, not coldly, but with pointed truth. You judged me for my politics, Blake. You threw me out, called my money dirty because I wore a red hat. But a person's worth isn't in who they vote for. It's how they treat others. Blake nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. I apologized to Mr. Riccio when the car got delivered. But I owe you one too. I was wrong. No excuses. Karoline studied him for a moment, then gave a rare, sincere smile. No need for excuses. Just growth. That's enough. Tom chuckled from his chair. Blake's not half bad, Miss Leavitt. Helped me shoot hoops yesterday. Still sucks, though. Blake laughed, his first real laugh of the night. I'm learning, Tom. You're a tough coach. From behind, Nicholas, Riccio approached, tall, commanding, his black suit tailored and effortless. He rested a hand on Karoline's shoulder and eyed Blake with something new in his gaze. Respect. Gotta say, he said to Karoline, watching him work here. He's trying. Then he turned to Blake. So, that gala what you thought MAGA was about? Blake shook his head slowly. No, sir. I thought it'd be pomp and show. But it's not. It's community. People. Guys like Tom. Nicholas nodded once. I was homeless once. Slept under scaffolding. Had nothing. I learned quick. Worth isn't in looks or party lines. It's in what you do. He looked at Blake. You were wrong to disrespect my wife, but you're trying to make it right. I can respect that, he paused, then added. Rio Enterprises needs a new fleet. If you keep changing, really changing, you'll handle that deal. Blake blinked. You serious? Nicholas smirked. I don't joke about business, but the choice is yours. Karoline chimed in, arms still crossed. The Azure's running. Great! Delivered on time. No issues. But next time, don't let politics cloud your job, Blake. Blake nodded firmly. I won't. Thank you, Miss Leavitt. Mr. Riccio. The gala carried on. Laughter, music, stories shared between tables. Blake wheeled Tom back toward the buffet, his posture less stiff, his presence human. Karoline and Nicholas lingered, watching. Think he's really changed? She asked. Nicholas chuckled. Maybe. And if not? He looked at her with a wry smile. He'll remember who the real powerhouse in the room is. She leaned against him gently, smiling. I already know. Epilogue. The story of Karoline Leavitt and Nicholas Riccio at Capital Luxury Motors reflects the sharp political divide in America today, where belief often overshadows basic decency. Blake Thompson represents a certain progressive hypocrisy, quick to condemn others for their views, blind to his own intolerance. Karoline and Nicholas, in contrast, didn't respond with cancel culture or outrage. They responded with action, with strength, with an open door, but clear boundaries. The red Rolls-Royce, the Veterans Gala, the act of service. It wasn't about proving superiority. It was about affirming dignity. The lesson. In a world of labels, MAGA, liberal, progressive, conservative, character still matters more than category. Like Karoline driving the Azure coupe through D.C., sometimes the Best way to answer prejudice is to roll right through it in style.